Yeah.
That was the actual agreement. Now, when that changed, did Steve sign off on it anywhere?
He never told me those changes. Just right now I heard. The first time I heard anything about it.
Here's the thing though. Steve, can you do the music?
So it's time for my afterthoughts on the Non Sequitur situation. Go ahead and source the video right now so I don't have to do it later. It's been about a month since Kyle kicked Steve off the show, something he had been plotting up to for a while. So in this video, I want to talk to you about a few key points that I think we were all thinking about back then, but have kind of faded away with the way everything went, for good reason, and we'll go into it. But let's hit the non-resolved questions over the breakup of the Non Sequitur Show really fast.
2, 3, jump!
Point 1, money. Back when this happened, the basic excuse of, quote, I kicked Steve out because he was mean, didn't make sense. For one, it goes against everything the non-sec was. More than that, though, I knew that Steve had been trying to get Kyle to respond for a few months, and Kyle purposely wasn't responding. So during a live stream, I brought up to Team Skeptic and Red's Rhetoric the possibility of Kyle spending all the money. When I interviewed Steve, he agreed with me. It was very possible that that was the key thing going on. Now, as time went on, I told myself that I was wrong, and that Kyle would prove me wrong by sending Steve the books and paying him what he was owed. But there is just one problem. Kyle hasn't paid Steve yet, or given Steve the books. By the way, it's like a month later. Both of these things are very important, by the way. Kyle admitted that Steve and Kyle started the show as a 50-50 show, which they would have when they started it. It was a small show. They had no way of knowing it would eventually make money. But imagine this scenario for me really fast. Imagine Steve and Kyle bump into each other and decide to start the show. Steve never brings up the money of the show because he's thinking that it's all going into an account and being saved, something Steve did state. After time went on and the show started making money, Kyle started pushing Steve out. He didn't schedule him as much or have his guests on, and this caused Steve to ask for his money from the accounts, as any sane, rational person would. Okay, let me pop back into this flashback really quick. Okay. Some people have stated that Steve is being greedy asking for his money. Steve should have gotten his money monthly anyway, and if you worked and didn't get paid and noticed you were being pushed out of a business, you would definitely ask for your money too. Don't even play that you wouldn't. Alright, back to the flashback. So Steve asked for his money and the books so he could make sure he got the correct amount, but Kyle wouldn't give it to him. And to add to the suspicious behavior, Kyle starts ignoring Steve and not scheduling him on the show. Both sides verified these events, and Red and Bull did too. So what if Kyle just spent the money? Drained the accounts every month since Steve wasn't bothering to ask for cash? This could explain all of this. Because honestly, there isn't a lot of other reason for Kyle to take this hard stance of pushing Steve out. On a show about logic and respecting people's opinion, it makes no sense that Kyle decided that Steve's opinions were harsh. Also, when you regularly debunk people, they are going to leave your show pissed off and angry and complain about who they don't like. It's basic debunkery 101, honestly. So anyway, jump out of the flashback. My main point is Kyle would be forced to withhold the books and the money if the money was spent. And he would have to either tell Steve that he spent the money and give Steve the opportunity to kick Kyle off the show or press charges or something if he waited. So really, the only option a criminal money thief has at this point would be to turn Steve into the bad guy. So do I have any new information that would help confirm or debunk this line of thinking? Yup. Kyle still hasn't given Steve the books or the money. It's pretty obvious, honestly. I want to add in, too, that Kyle promised he would give Steve the money and the books, even on the Non-Sec show when he addressed this. There is really no good reason for Kyle to keep this from Steve if it is there. Because if it goes to court, which I can confirm Steve is taking it there, Kyle knows he's going to be ordered, at the very least, to give Steve half of everything up until the split. The court most likely will order Steve to be given the YouTube channel also. Anyway, I had to bring that up because it leads into number 2, the aftermath. So here's what has happened since the breakup. Steve has grown his Patreon bigger than the Non-Sec's Patreon. The Non-Sec hasn't had any of these great guests on that just refused to come on because Steve was there. And the comment section and the thumbs up, thumbs down ratio has gone insane on the Non-Sec show. You know, it's been ratioed, a bunch of thumbs downs, while Steve's channels are doing great. This really shows that the community around all of us are good people, in my opinion, for the most part, and rely on logic to make up their minds on things. I know some of you may not believe me on this, but other communities on YouTube are very trusting of a community leader, even when they're being lied to, and even in the face of logic. I know, right? Sounds insane. So let me pull up. So the next point that I need to make is not a diss. It's not me trying to be mean to anyone or start stuff with anyone. I liked Godless Engineer's YouTube channel because I thought that he was a flat earth debunker, you know, and I watched his flat earth debunking stuff and really didn't even know he was on the Non-Sec as much until I heard about everything that happened. But for people that need caught up, what happened basically was that Godless Engineer and Casey started to be guests on the show after they met Kyle. This all started right before Steve started to get pushed out. And, of course, Steve quickly was, after being pushed out, started asking for the money in the books, which led to me making this video. So, therefore, I must talk about it. No offense, no hate. Need to make a point. All we did was ask for Steve's informal POA to leave us alone and stop tagging us in his attempts to contact Kyle. Now, here's the really strange thing about this. They were both extremely vocal before the video came out that was exposed Kyle for stealing the show, okay? Now, I want you to understand also that the people who said that Steve was a bad guy and that they hated Steve, a lot of that happened because Steve wouldn't call Mrs. Engineer because she's not an engineer. Now, there's a video going around. I just put up a video, YouTube Quacks, and it's got this guy talking about, you know, in certain states, he reads the regulation for who can be called an engineer and who can't. There actually is law about this. So Steve does have a point to why he wouldn't call her Mrs. Engineer. I don't understand why it made her so mad. Anyway, in the end, though, I want to make sure everybody knows that was a huge point leading up to this. Now, here's what I don't like. Saying that this guy is an informal POA, she is dissing at him. She never liked Steve, very vocal about how she didn't like him, and it is leading everyone to this unanswered question of how much did Godless Engineer, but not really Godless Engineer, so don't get mad at me, man, but the argument between Miss Engineer and Steve, how much did that affect Kyle in having Steve on less, which led to him asking for the money, which led to all of this. So let me show you some stuff. This is something Steve put out. Oh, but GE, you have jumped headfirst into this. You've injected yourself into all this, and now you want to be left out? Exactly. I want to make a point, and it's not to be mean to Godless Engineer or Mrs. GE. They have been putting disses towards towards Steve ever since they started to team up with Kyle. I don't understand why. I don't get it. It never made much sense because this is all supposed to be about logic, arguing your opinion. They've always been very rude towards him. And for the video, for them to be... Now, I saw them. I even made a video. In one of my videos, I talked about how on Twitter, GE and Mrs. GE were kind of, you know, spamming stuff about how Kyle's right to do this, stay out of Kyle's business with this. Kyle's doing the right thing. Steve didn't add anything to the show. Steve was abrasive. He scared off guests. They were very vocal with that until Kyle was shown to be the thieving crook that he is. And it makes sense then that they now want to be left alone, not to be tagged in this, and to move on. Now, Godless Engineer did lose some subscribers from this. People have talked about it. I don't want to focus on that. I do think that there was a reason for that because people from Non-Sec subbed to to GE. And then after seeing GE defend Kyle, that's why. All of this is just me discussing what happened. No shade or hate thrown any different way. So this is Godless Engineer after, now once again, after the video comes out exposing Kyle to be stealing the show, instead of defending for Steve based on principle, GE says, leave me out of this now and in the future. Quit tagging me. Quit mentioning me. Stop. Very, very strange to me. I don't know why. I don't know why he wouldn't jump in and weigh in with why he thinks it's what he thinks about Kyle doing this now that he's heard Kyle's own words admit it was 50-50 and that Steve never agreed to any of these changes. So let's see how the community reacted. The best thing for both parties is to ignore one another. And Noose the Frog. Why would they ignore one another? What? So because like everything changed, they should just be ignored on it, right? No. Showing his true colors, never a dull moment. That's some grade A drama queen stuff. This needs to stop. It's between Steve and Kyle. Really? Well, it wasn't between Steve and Kyle until the video came out busting Kyle. I think that's a point that I want to make in this. I think Steve's mad that GE has more than once called him a criminal. I do have to say it crossed the line, in my opinion. I'd be mad too. Regardless of anything else in the kerfluffle, if GE hasn't already, he should retract it and apologize. But he didn't. How do you know? Look here. Steve is never getting an apology from us, period. This is why people are upset. I want to make sure it's direct and it's clear. This is why people were upset with Godless Engineer and his wife. It wasn't just something that Steve unfairly got mad about. It is because even when they deserve to give an apology to Steve, they won't. So then, my friends, is it not completely normal for people to say that most likely Godless Engineer and his wife influenced Kyle in his decision to schedule Steve less? It makes perfect sense. In fact, I'm not going to let it go. And I hope Godless Engineer is a good enough person to see that I'm looking at this from the outside. I'm not trying to put him down or be unfair with him. I'm literally trying to show what's right in the situation. And it is that, yes, Godless Engineer owes Steve an apology, and the wife does too, in my opinion. Back to the community's response, though. Certainly won't be easier to just forward the message to Kyle, right? Better show off us wanting to be left alone after you both, KC and GE, engaged in this. If you want to be out of this, then just be out of this. Soap opera continues. Not blaming y'all, it's just crazy that it keeps going. Well, no, it's not crazy that it keeps going. It should keep going until Kyle pays Steve and until they make it right. Now, I don't think Steve wants the channel back, but he definitely deserves half of every single dime that was generated by every show from Non Sec up until the split. I will always be a fan, even if I disagree with a few things here and there. I find KC and GE to be good people. That'll never change. I'm a real fan. Nothing Steve says will change it. I'm loyal to my friends. I'm loyal to my favorite YouTubers. Flip-flop all you want. Quite frankly, up yours. Fully agree. One can even be on both sides if there's a strong relation. Every parent of... Oh, who knows what they're talking about. Steve has to say mean nothing. I've followed you both since finding and appreciate what you do. I partially watch a rant by him slamming Non Sequitur and GE. Also was a brag fest. Steve M will be ignored onwards. And you always see the same people acting like that, right? Is he the actual Steve McRae? Yes. Oh, that's not good. I blocked Steve a while back. Kyle is also not on a good list after he treated scientist Mel and Shannon Q poorly after the Nationalist show. However, I do check in with Non-Sec if a topic or person isn't a complete dumpster fire. I think that if you're willing to call out flat earthers for being wrong, and you're willing to call out the ones that are being disingenuous, which is what Godless Engineer's channel grew and became what it is from doing, you have to be able to stand up to someone who steals a channel from someone else and doesn't pay them for the work that they do over a year and a half. Or why would anyone watch you debunk the flat earth or anything else for that matter? Also, one last point. Again, not trying to start anything with Godless Engineer. I just hope he can respond and give, logical points to this. How would he feel if him and his wife split up and she took the channel, knowing that he did most of the work, built most of all of it, and got it to where it was at? She locked him out, she kicked him out, and just took off. And when he went to the community and said, my wife stole it from me, she just said, no, he's lying, and everybody believed her. Because I would stand up for Godless Engineer in that, in that scenario if he got screwed over. In fact, if Steve would have screwed over Kyle, I would have stood up for Kyle. So let's just hope this resolves, because leaving it open, I'm sorry to say, is only going to continue everyone's thoughts on it where it is. I'm UNIRock. Thanks for watching. Hit like, hit subscribe. Leave me what you think in the comment section. It really does help out. I try to use it in future videos if people leave a lot of comments. And in all, people will say that this is a bad thing. Why did this have to happen? Not a bad thing. Now we know the true nature of some people that are involved. Hopefully they'll make responses. Hopefully they'll move forward with this in the right way. But either way, we know the true nature of those involved. And if you want to get that good non-sec, that old school non-sec goodness, Steve just got a new computer donated to him. He just got his Patreon buffed up, and he's doing some good work. So go check out Steve McCrae. See you in the next one. Peace.